All right, let's go, because you know what I came in to do.
I don't get paid for overtime. I'm here to fight.
I always said that Usyk and Fury will not fight in February. They won't fight in March. There's no reason to set these deadlines for AJ to sign the contract, because Tyson Fury, in recent history anyway, hasn't took two fights in such close proximity. Like, okay, he wanted the tune-up against Manuel Child, Derek Chisora, and a tune-up against AJ. Yeah, right. In December, so he could fight Usyk early next year. The first thing Tyson Fury said post-fight Derek Chisora is he needs surgery on his elbow.
I got to do some stuff. I've got some hand problems, and I got to maybe have some surgery on my elbow. But after that, I'm ready for anybody.
Well, what's happened to that story? We're not hearing about him going into surgery or anything. They're making the fight. Well, the February date, they wrote that off. They're not going to make it for February. Then it was March the 4th, according to Frank Warren and Usyk's team. And now they're talking about late March, early April. You want to put any money that a fight don't happen in April? I don't think it happens in April.
Here's what I am hearing that's new. That A, the Middle East is not a lock, as we pretty much thought last time we addressed this. Second, from several sources, that the UK is a, quote, very strong possibility. They want, that would mean a stadium fight. Basically, if you're doing a stadium fight in the UK, you're down to two places. You have Cardiff, which holds between 77 and maybe 80,000, and you have Wembley, where you can get, you can get 100 in there. Absolutely. So I think that
Bob and Frank and Fury cannot finesse the Saudis to back these big fights like Eddie Hearn and AJ could, for whatever reason. There could be a few reasons. I mean, since the arbitration mediation failure, how much times has Fury fought? 3 times. And the Saudis haven't invested in none of them fights. The AJ Usyk rematch, where was that? It was in Saudi. So they may have lost faith. Maybe they think that Bob and Fury mugged them off. Then people are very serious about their shit. And maybe there might not be a second chance now. So it looks like, from what KREIGEL is saying,
the Middle East is not a lock, as we pretty much thought.
The Middle East is not a rock. And Bob Arum said they've got the end of the week to put up the money to make the fight. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But from what KREIGEL said, the likelihood is going to be in England. And if it's in England, and Tyson Fury is still expecting a lion's share, like people are saying, well, is Bob Arum saying that, or is Tyson Fury saying that? Well, Tyson Fury's saying that. Bob Arum represents him. He promotes him. If you want the bulk of the purse, rather than 50-50, and the world want to see this fight, no money from the Saudis, the power kind of swings back into Usyk's favour a little. Because why shouldn't he insist on 50-50? He's got 3 straps. And if the Saudis are out the picture and they ain't got no big investors to bankroll the event, Fury has nowhere to go. If you don't fight Usyk, where does he go? What does he do, fight Anthony Joshua? Joshua should definitely demand 50-50. If they avoid Usyk and they go for Joshua, 50-50 or no fight. Frank, Bob and Fury, they're going to say that Tyson is going to be selling all the tickets. He's going to be selling all the pay-per-view. Yes, he does have the location argument in his favour. He does. He does. He's more of a draw than Usyk. But with all the money that's being made, isn't he going to look a little greedy? Aren't you going to look a little greedy, Bob and Frank, that you wouldn't just give him 50-50 and get the fight made? It was just last year he was saying he'd fight Anthony Joshua for free on free TV, terrestrial TV, with free tickets for fans. And now he needs the lion's share of a fight that's going to generate millions upon millions. Yeah, the power balance has swung back into Ukraine's favour. Because where does Tyson Fury have to go? When Canelo wanted to become undisputed champion, Caleb Plant got a $10 million purse. Did he get that because he fought his way through and marketed his way to be a $10 million fighter? No. I have the missing piece in the jigsaw if you want to be undisputed. Caleb Plant don't have a better resume than Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith. He's not a better fighter than either of them either. But they held that last piece of the jigsaw hostage. Canelo needed 1 belt. You had to pay him 10 mil. You got to pay Usyk what he's due. And nobody's going to look at Usyk like he's greedy for wanting 50-50. You know, I'm changing my stance a little from yesterday, where I was saying, yeah, they can make a good case to get a bigger share than Usyk. But I'm changing my stance a little now. You know, you already got over on Dillian. You gave Dillian 20. The mandatory, you gave him 20 and took 80. Now you're starting to look like greedy motherfuckers now. You have to squeeze everybody. So right now, I think it's at a stage where people have had enough of Bob, Frank, Fury, and their greed. Now, the WBC have a few variations on purse percentages for challenges. For whatever reason, Dillian only got 20. It could have been because of that purse, the last free purse calculation thing. Frank said he only cleared 800,000 for Povetkin. So they were working within the rules of the WBC contract law. So you can't argue with that. But there's nothing to support a claim that you get the lion's share over Usyk. Saying that if the fight is in England, we deserve a bigger share. Well, that's just talk. You haven't got the WBC to support a stitch-up job here. Although Usyk did try to stitch up Joe Joyce. When Usyk was supposed to fight Joyce in the WBO Eliminator, the minimum split they could make Joyce take was 20%. Krusak was talking about giving Joyce 7% and Usyk take 93%. So what goes around comes around. And not that Fury cares, because he don't seem to have much shame, which is a good thing, which is actually a good thing, right? He's going to look like he's trying to avoid Usyk. The middleweight. You're trying to avoid a middleweight? Wasn't Frank Warren said they only have a short time to get this done? And they do. You got Dubois, you got Hrgovic waiting for shots. They've already forfeited their title shots, so this fight can be made. You need to get it made. You can't be haggling over 50-50. Now, Frank can control Daniel and make Daniel sit down, but they can't control Hrgovic. Eddie and Callie and Nice are going to be banging on the IBF's door, telling Daryl Peoples, we demand our title shot. They've had enough time to get the fight made and they haven't got it done. Joe Joyce, he ain't going to be a bag of laughs about the situation either. He wants a title shot. You need to nip this in the bud, get the fight over the line. You're probably going to sell over 1 million pay-per-views. You've got 95,000 people or maybe 100,000 people walking through the turnstiles at Wembley. You're good. 50-50, you're good. This Espinosa guy, I have no time for. He's trying to tell us now. Terrence's insistence on getting transparency for expenses and the slowness of his responses to the deal ultimately sunk negotiations. Well, of course his responses were slow. He already agreed to a lower percentage. And like I explained, open up the books is just a metaphor. He doesn't want to see, or doesn't need to see, everything Al Heyman does. He needs a breakdown, though, on this particular fight. He needs to see where the money from the gross is going. So if he does take from the net, he's not mugging himself off. Dimitri Bivol spoke about fighting at 168. And he spoke about it quite a lot before he beat Canelo. But it looks like Eddie Hearn wants to hold him to that because, you know, it's something he's repeated. And the rematch against Canelo could be at 168. And that's what Eddie Hearn believes, the rematch will be at 168. And there's no doubt this is what Canelo wants. Now, this is what you need to know. This is what is happening. This isn't Eddie just winging it, going on some interview and just winging it. No. Obviously, Canelo don't fancy his chances of beating Bivol at 175. But he's not going to come out and say that himself. He's not going to come out and say, I want the rematch at 168. No, you get Eddie to do it. You get Eddie to do the dirty work, where he's going to get stick. That's why Bob Arum, when he said that Tyson Fury should get the lion's share against Usyk if it's in Britain, he's taking the stick for what Tyson Fury has co-signed on what he wants Bob to put out there. People asking, oh, well, that's Bob saying that. That's not Tyson Fury. No, it's Tyson Fury. Bob said that about 2-3 days ago. Tyson hasn't said anything to contradict what Bob said. If you want proper revenge in the rematch, you can't change the circumstances in your favor, Canelo. Last time, you was trying to take that WBA light heavyweight title belt, and that's what you should be doing in the rematch. But yo, if Bivol signs off on it, that's fair enough. He gets the chance to become undisputed 168-pound champion, but then again, he could become undisputed light heavyweight champion. Which one should he go for? Should he really be pushing for this Beterbiev fight? Perhaps he should. But top rank Bob Arum, what did he say before Bivol beat Canelo? Oh, Bivol's kind of boring. And he couldn't be bothered to make the Beterbiev fight. So why is Bivol going to wait for Bob Arum to decide if he's going to give the green light to that fight? Why would he? If Canelo's going to give him the bag, take the Canelo bag. Why not? You ain't going to get a bigger purse anywhere else fighting Beterbiev. Now, if Bob left the lines of communication a little healthier, then yeah, you could argue you should clean out light heavy and then go for Canelo. Yeah, it'd be great to get an undisputed light heavyweight champion, but that ain't Eddie Hearn's business. He needs to keep Bivol busy, and he needs to do the best for Joshua Buatsi. So Buatsi could be getting his shot at Bivol. Because Bivol ain't talking about Beterbiev. I don't hear him talk about Beterbiev right now. Beterbiev has Anthony Yard issues. And the way Bivol cleaned up Zerdo, there's nothing to stop that fight happening. And I want to see Buatsi get his shot. So the tickets range from £36.50 to £207. Wembley Arena, 12,500 capacity. Some say it ranged from 10.3 in there to a capacity sold out crowd. From what I saw, it looked pretty packed and energetic. Pay-per-view pricing, £11.99 in the UK, $40 in the US. 300k pay-per-view sold in the UK and the US. An individual named Salt Pappy seems to have made an impression on a lot of people with his knockouts. And KSI and his Misfits imprint on DAZN are developing a brand. Eubank and Liam Smith, they fight this Saturday. Their pay-per-view will be sold for $19.99. It's £8 more than KSI. So they'll have to hit around 150,000 to enjoy the same success. And they could do that, but I'm not sure they do much more than that. Eubank did horrible numbers on ITV, horrible. And that could be one of the reasons Al Heyman had to pull out of the UK ITV boxing deal. Done horrible numbers. But you don't put on one card and give up. That could be partly the reason he did, though. This is the biggest fight that Sky could make. And Liam Smith is a former WBO champion. He's fought Canelo, he's fought Jaime Munguia, he's fought Jesse Vargas in America. He's from a fighting family where his brother Callum is a former world champion. Eubank, his dad is a legend in UK boxing. He's fought the likes of George Groves, Billy Joe Saunders. He's held interim world title straps. He's probably the most highest market value fighter that Sky have on there right now, Eubank. And we're asking if he can sell more numbers than KSI. It's a sorry state of affairs, not for Sky, but for boxing in general, I guess.
The energy is going to be different. It's a different situation. I mean, the UK fans have the best fans in the sport, and it's been like that for a long time. We have too many options here. You know, you have one. We have too many options that people can pick and choose what they want. They have football, they have cricket, they have boxing, maybe something else I'm unaware of. But when it comes to boxing, they're rabid about their boxing, and they show up and they show out.
Ever since Carl Froch did that 80,000 at Wembley, there's this misconception. And I guess Andre Ward is part of the Carl Froch narrative because he won the Super 6 series and was arguably, when Floyd Mayweather retired, pound for pound the best fighter in the sport. He unanimously outpointed Carl Froch in the final of the Super 6 tournament. Froch, he went on to do 80,000 at Wembley. Ward wanted a rematch with Froch at Wembley, but Froch wanted to do it in Nottingham Arena, and the fight never materialized. Ward has it in his head that boxing is this huge sport in the UK. But what is that based on? You know, netball. Netball, according to this study sample, there's a few though, there are a few. Some have boxing maybe at number 8, 9 or 10. Ice hockey, that's a Canadian, more American thing. According to this study's survey, which is the most popular one I could find, that's ahead of boxing, rowing, athletics, swimming, badminton, tennis, rugby, cricket, football. You know, they haven't included sports like golf or pub sports like darts, snooker. Most of the popular lists that come up on the search engine don't have boxing in the top 10 of most popular sports in the UK. You know, sports like snooker are going through a resurgence now. It's become very popular again. Very popular. It still has a spot on the BBC. You can't find boxing on the BBC no more. You can't find boxing on ITV. They're our biggest TV stations. You still have boxing on Showtime. You still have it on ESPN out there. And Fox. You still have boxing on there. We have boxing on Channel 5, which is not as popular as BBC 1 or 2 or ITV. And it's not like we're getting world title fights on Channel 5, no. We're getting British title fights. Josh Kelly versus Troy Williamson. Udofia versus Bentley. British title fights we're getting on Channel 5. Here's The Guardian slamming terrestrial television in the UK for not broadcasting Carl Froch defending his WBC super middleweight title against Andre Dirrell. This was a good fight. You know, the only way you got to see this live is if you stayed up until 4 or 5 a.m. on a channel named Primetime on Sky. This is Carl Froch, remember, 80,000 man, right? What people don't know, Carl Froch was struggling for dates on ITV, and so was Amir Khan. That's why he ended up on Primetime. This is before he signed to Eddie on Sky. He was with Mick Hennessy at this stage. You know, people keep saying, oh, boxing huge in Britain. Amir Khan, James DeGill, Carl Frampton, when Eddie was in training wheels, where were they? Where were they? They was on the PBC fighting. They was on the PBC, on Golden Boy. Amir Khan was on Golden Boy. Ricky Hatton had a deal on Golden Boy. What was Eddie and his old man doing? Oh, we're putting a prize fighter tournament. We're putting on prize fighter tournaments, which even Ben Shalom was doing up until recently. And I'm not bad-mouthing prize fighter tournaments, right? But let's not pretend they are what they're not. They're a substitution when you don't have the gene pool to put on world-class boxing events, main events, chief support, and preliminaries. Yeah, I said it. Adam Azim, he fights 11th of February at the Wembley Arena, same arena that KSI was just in, against Santos Reyes. He's headlining Sky Cards. He's 7-0, 6 knockouts, headlining Sky Cards. His opponent is 12-0 and has 3 knockouts. Is Adam Aziz going to sell out the Wembley Arena? No. Is he going to do 10.3 in the 12.5 capacity arena? No. Adam Aziz is a good prospect. But when Eddie was on Sky, he would never headline a card. He might headline a next-gen card on a weekday. But this is what they're talking about as one of their main event fighters. His best win is against Ryan Charlton. David Haye Vladimir Klitschko messed up the pay-per-view platform in the UK for a couple of years. Tollgate, where David, done a lot of stepping around the ring and didn't want to engage. That done 1.1 on Sky. 2011. There wasn't a pay-per-view fight until 2013. Carl Froch versus Mikhail Kessler, done 32,000. Carl Froch was holding down UK boxing at this stage here, right? This is Kessler 2. This is after he lost to Andre Ward. He got bigger and bigger and bigger after he lost to Andre Ward. The Kessler fight was very exciting, entertaining. It done 32,000 buys. The platform has to rebuild itself. We're only talking 8 years back, right? The first Froch Groves fight was fought in an arena, Manchester Arena, and it only done 47,000 pay-per-view buys. The rematch was in Wembley and done 355,000. So that's a contrast in itself. Anthony Joshua was on that Wembley bill, having his 5th pro fight. And Carl Froch, is a bit of a weirdo. I don't want to say he's a hater. He's just who he is. He responds to this post by Boxing Kingdom. Most people think Anthony Joshua was solely responsible for the rise of UK boxing a decade ago. It was actually Carl Froch. Froch won on the road constantly and brought the stadium fights to the UK. Tough as nails and underrated. And Froch says, if you know, you know. And a lot of that is true. You cannot tell the story without Carl Froch's input, there's no doubt. Actually, the real turning point, not for Carl Froch, but for British boxing, was the Lucien Boutte fight for the IBF title, straight after he lost to Andre Ward. This was his bounce back fight. He went in there with Lucien Boutte 30-0. And it was crunch time for Eddie as well, because there just wasn't nothing happening here, man. Prize fighter tournaments, people. Prize fighter tournaments. There wasn't nothing happening. Around this period here, yeah, after Carl Froch won the title, it was scarce on the world title front. I don't know who all the champions were at the time. Kell Brook, he didn't have a strap at the time. Khan, around 2012, he lost to Danny Garcia, and he never won a world title after that. And around that time there, Eddie had people like Lee Purdy challenging Devin Alexander for world titles. Kell Brook, he pulled out of them Devin Alexander fights before Devin lost to Sean Porter, and he should have been challenging for the world title. But we had Lee Purdy, and he got washed. Remember Darren Barker was in the corner for Lee Purdy, and he pulled him out mercifully. He wasn't getting concussed or nothing, but it was just one-sided repetitive. No disrespect to Lee. Domestic level, British title level. Good domestic level, but no more than that. I mean, Eddie was winging it. Eddie was winging it at this time. You know what I mean? Like, when he sent Purdy over there, Purdy didn't make the weight for the Alexander fight, so he wasn't eligible to win the title. He went on Twitter hoping to make an interesting story, telling everybody that Purdy was struggling to make the weight. Him and his dad Barry, Purdy and his dad Barry, were in a sauna trying to get the weight off. He had to delete the tweet because British Boxing Board of Control regulations, fighters cannot use saunas to shed weight. And Frank Warren got on that and was bombing on Eddie. Eddie couldn't say nothing because, like, Frank knows the rules from back to front that I do know. There's nothing you can tell Frank Warren about the British Boxing Board of Control rulings. He knows the rules better than they do. He was blasting him up in the tabloids and everything. Yeah, he was blasting Eddie up. So Eddie was winging it. He was in over his head. But he was doing a good job. He was doing the best he could. And obviously the AJ signing, we've got to start with that Dillian White fight. Like, why credit Anthony Joshua for? Without saying it in words, he acknowledges the part that Dillian played in him developing them stadium fights and them multi-million pound purses and pay-per-view buys. He acknowledges it. Because he made sure Dillian was on the undercard of at least a couple or 2, 3 or 4 of his world title fights. And that's his decision that Dillian's on there. Because Dillian played a blinder. Even before they fought, there was the card where AJ was fighting Gary Cornish, the big Scottish guy, undefeated Scottish guy. And Dillian was taking on some American, I can't remember his name. And Dillian just stole the press conference. He destroyed Gary Cornish in the press conference. You're shit, you can't fight. And then the AJ Dillian build-up was just like, for a British title fight, how do you sell 420,000 pay-per-views for a British title fight? Now, we're in 2016, and Tyson Fury is obviously on the sidelines and got all his issues. He was supposed to bring back that feel-good factor to British boxing, but November 2015, he done 545,000 against Klitschko for the unified heavyweight title on Sky. But he couldn't capitalize on the time on the momentum. It's not bad numbers, but it's not great numbers because we didn't have a proper heavyweight champion since Lennox Lewis. The fight didn't please a lot of people either. And I'm not dumping it all on Fury. Vlad was not a popular champion. His excessive holding, especially in that Povetkin fight, he wasn't a popular champion. Competent, very good, but not popular outside the Ukraine and Germany. But what goes around comes around. Fury, he's the guy with the WBC strap, and AJ is now in rehabilitation, trying to get back in the game, get back his straps. New situation, new trainer, etc., etc. And since both AJ and Fury first held titles in 2015, 2016, a lot of stuff has changed. The crossover boxing, YouTube boxing, has made its mark. The women have never been in a better position as boxers. The Middle East are prepared to pay big money for fights. Japan, they can hold their own in terms of boxing cards. We've got streaming apps now, not just DAZN, ESPN, Fight, Triller, if they're still going. Frank had a bad phase from around 2004 till recently. Like Calzaghe left him, Hatton left him. He had Groves, DeGale. He promoted the fight they had on Sky Box Office, but none of them won world titles with him. They were gone before that. When Eddie was just finding his feet early in the game, and Khan was off to Golden Boy and Hatton was off to Golden Boy, and the PBC were taking the likes of Khan, Frampton, who again left Frank. I think he went back to him, right? But he left. DeGale went over to the PBC. Frank couldn't get none of these guys. They were going across the pond. And when Eddie established himself, all of them, I think, who I mentioned, ended up at Matchroom. You know, you got Derek Chisora, he ended up at Matchroom. He used to call himself Mr. Box Nation. Why? Derek was keeping the lights on there. He was the star player at Box Nation for a few years. That's why when he got suspended after the incident with David Hay, Frank had to, really take it to the board and say, look, you can't keep Derek on the sidelines. How am I going to keep going? I need Derek out there. Then they lifted the ban. But as soon as Frank got his hooks into Tyson Fury, he started disrespecting Derek. And Derek went over to Matchroom and became a pay-per-view fighter. When he was on Box Nation, post-fight on one of his fights, Derek said, I'm going to fight Alexander Povetkin next. And we was like, yes! Wicked fight. Frank vetoed it and said, no, I don't know what he's talking about. That fight's not going to happen. Why did he do that? Eddie wouldn't have did that. I tell some of these youngsters you should get behind, maybe not get behind Eddie, but you should get behind British boxing a little more. Unless you want Britain to crash. And I think there are some Brits who just prey on the downfall of the country. They just don't support anything that's good manufactured here for whatever reason. I tell them, I remember British title fights between Funzo Banjo and Hugh Roy Curry, R.I.P., big up, Yardman, you know what I mean? They were terrible fights for the British title. They weren't good fights. You know, I remember when it was a real struggle for British boxing on the international scene, on world level, taking on Americans. It was just a big, big battle. There was no British champions winning no heavyweight title. You could actually feel the low self-esteem from British boxing. You could feel it. You could go to the rankings on the Ring magazine or even the Boxing News, and you'd be lucky to count 3, 4 or 5 British fighters ranked, or to even have one world champion. And I always say, everything is in phases, and no one is entitled to be in charge of boxing. No country is entitled to say, we control boxing. You have no entitlements. All you have is what you produce today. I believe people like Marcus is a good dude, but I believe he has that sense of entitlement because he grew up Mayweather. He was probably a kid who heard about Holyfield, Tyson, Muhammad Ali, a prime Roy Jones. And then they didn't just have the homegrown fighters I mentioned there. You've got the Mexicans who fought over there. Chavez, De La Hoya, American-Mexican, but, you know, Marquez, Pacquiao, the imports who exclusively fought in America. They had everything. And there's almost an entitlement. It belongs to us. And now he's realizing it doesn't. I mentioned the women. I mentioned the crossover YouTube boxing. All the other territories who fancy their chances now. The Middle East, Australia, Japan, and the UK, of course. And there's going to be more. Don't be shocked if Africa start making a push to put on some big shows. There's a whole lot to compete with. Right now, no one country is going to be able to control boxing. And that includes America, Marcus. No one country. There's too much to compete with. You've got UFC, you've got the women doing their thing in the United Kingdom. Too much pockets of activity. I was just listening to Ade's stream, and he was talking about a possible Jake Paul KSI fight. And a lot of people said, oh, it's going to do millions, in it. And he said, it could do a lot of buys, but not necessarily millions, because a lot of them guys who follow KSI and Jake Paul and Logan Paul, they're into the gaming thing, and they're very tech savvy. And Ade was saying a lot of them know how to stream fights legally. So everybody has something to contend with to stay relevant. Some issues to stay relevant. It is what it is. I've heard a lot of people say Eddie is losing ground on the domestic front, and he should have never signed with DAZN. It was the worst move ever. And that has to be the most negative shit ever. The facts are, before DAZN, there was Matchroom USA. First signing was Danny Jacobs. He signed him in 2017. And Jarrell Miller. The DAZN deal was struck in 2018. Talking about Eddie's yet to break America. America can't break America. Bob Arum, alongside the likes of Don King, Tex Rickard, etc., one of the most prestigious promoters ever. He couldn't get Crawford and Spence on. And look, in the 80s and 90s, that would have been easy work for Bob Arum. Easy work. Cross promotions or in-house. Easy work. Eddie done how many stadium fights? 90,000, 80,000, 70-odd thousand. Pay-per-view buys, 1 million. He's had the UK on lock for how long? 8 years or so. So sacrificing a little momentum in the UK to work with Canelo, to work alongside Golovkin, Chocolatito and Estrada, and sign up kids like Bam Rodriguez and Baumgardner. I'd like to know what you call success. If Eddie is a failure in boxing, in modern day boxing I'm talking, I'd like to know what you call success. Eddie wanted to expand before DAZN headhunted him for the job. He was more than likely going to outgrow Matchroom eventually, in all truth. You guys want him just to stay there promoting on the same territory. Eddie has set a template for boxing promoters. You got to start stamping that passport. He set a template for Ben Shalom. If Ben Shalom wants to succeed, he knows he's got some big shoes to fill. No, he should have no regrets. No regrets at all. Leaving Sky. You should be grateful that he left Sky. When he left Sky, Sky threw the kitchen sink at boxing. They were supposed to just disappear and, okay, that's it. And that's what Eddie thought was going to happen. But no, Adam Smith, no, we got to go at this. And you can see they went aggressively at boxing. That's to the benefit of the consumer, isn't it? The one negative, with Cali, Eddie, Ben Shalom, Frank, we are in danger of watering down the product and not getting the cross-promotion fights that will be needed with so much networks and promotional outfits spread out. That's the one potential negative. But most people, you know, when they're commenting or speaking online, they just say the first thing that comes to mind. And that's what people are doing. If you're going to say you should regret leaving Sky, you should regret signing a $100 million deal to try and expand your brand. That's not a time for regret, my friend. That's a time for work. It's not a time for regret. He might regret the workload he's taken on. You might regret that. But let's say he failed and they sacked him. Last year he got sacked, 2022. He only lasted 3 years. Even then, like, if you were to ask him, do you regret that? I would hope he said no. I signed the biggest promotional deal in the history of promotional deals. You know, even the so-called failures, which he had no control of, the so-called failures. This man nailed a $150 million site fee from Saudi Arabia for Fury and AJ. A lot of you are going to reply, yeah, but the fight didn't happen. Yeah, I know it didn't happen. But he still got the deal, didn't he? He still did it. It was other people who didn't play their part. What about the $60 million site fee he got for the AJ Ruiz rematch? What about that? Who's done shit like that? But work has to be done on the domestic front. And I'm hoping that he does have plans to tighten up. And yet, of course, Frank and Ben are pushing him. And they should be pushing him. Or what the fuck are they doing? They should be pushing him. But should he have regrets? Regrets is a loaded term. Regrets sometimes, a lot of times, represent change. Change is taking place. And change is not always comfortable, but change is necessary. Jay-Z said it, man.
Gotta learn to live with regrets.